I've spent 32 years, for months, and 11 days sitting in a room where the air is thin and the clocks tick a little louder than they do in the real world. When you're a hospice volunteer, you don't just provide comfort, you become a curator of ghosts. You become the final vessel for the secrets people were too terrified to tell the living. Everyone thinks the end is full of cinematic speeches and grand, poetic finality. It isn't. It's mostly heavy breathing, the smell of antiseptic, and a profound, echoing quiet. But in the small hours, the lucid windows where the morphine fades and the soul peeks out one last time, the truth finally emerges. I'm 74 years old now. My own window is getting smaller. As I sit here in my study, watching the afternoon light stretch across the floor, I realize that of all the thousands of hours I've logged at the bedside, not once, not a single time, did I hear a man wish he'd spent more time at the office. Not once did I hear a woman regret not hitting her quarterly targets or wish she'd bought a faster car. What they regret is much heavier. It's the crushing weight of the unsaid. It's the realization that they spent a lifetime building a house they never actually lived in. I remember a man named Julian. He was a high court judge, a man whose very presence demanded a straightening of the spine. To the world, he was a pillar of granite. But on his last night, the granite didn't just crack, it dissolved. He didn't talk about his landmark cases. He didn't talk about the respect he commanded in the courtroom. He gripped my hand with a strength I didn't think his frail body possessed, and he whispered about a small bakery in a seaside town. He was 22 once. He had flour on his apron and a girl named Claire who smelled like yeast and lavender. But his father, a man whose ghost Julian was still trying to please at 80, told him that a son of his would never waste his mind on bread. So Julian spent 60 years wearing a black robe that felt, in the end, like a shroud. He told me, I lived a lie for 80 years just to make a dead man proud. That is the first thing they say. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. We spend our youth trying to be correct. We choose the stable's degree. We marry the sensible person. We act like we're auditioning for a role written by a director who died before we were even born. But standing at the edge of the abyss, the opinions of your father, your boss, or your neighbors vanish. All that remains is the cold realization that you were an actor in your own life instead of the lead. Then there is the silence of lost friends. People think friendships are like trees, that they'll just stand there forever whether you water them or not. But they are more like fires. If you don't tend to them, they turn to ash. I wish I'd stayed in touch. I've watched strong, stoic men sob because they didn't know how to track down a best friend from 30 years ago just to say, I remember that summer. They realized, too late, that their busyness was just a slow-motion way of committing social suicide. I saw a woman pass away holding a phone that never rang, her thumb hovering over a contact she hadn't called since the 1990s because of some petty disagreement about a wedding invitation. Pride is a very cold bedfellow in a hospice ward. We let these golden threads snap because we assume there will always be a tomorrow to tie them back together. But tomorrow is a promissory note that life isn't obligated to honor. But of all the shadows I've watched, the darkest one is the suppression of the soul. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. This is the one that keeps me awake at night. This is the one I see in my own reflection. We are raised to be stable, to be composed, especially men of my generation. We swallow our anger to keep the peace, and we swallow our love because we're afraid of looking weak. But those feelings don't go away. They don't evaporate. They ferment. They turn into stones in your chest. I had a brother once. Thomas. We shared the same bedroom, the same dreams, the same blood. Then came a dispute over a piece of land, a patch of dirt that neither of us even needed. That dirt became a wall. 15 years of silence. I told myself I was standing my ground. But standing by his casket after he died, I realized I wasn't standing on my ground, I was standing on my own heart. I never told him I missed him. I never told him that he was the only person who truly understood our childhood. Now, I talk to a headstone, and it's a very one-sided conversation. I've seen this 1,000 times at the bedside, a son standing by a dying father, both of them vibrating with the need to say, "I love you," but the words are too heavy for their rusted vocal cords. They just stare at the heart monitor, watching the line go flat, carrying the weight of the unsaid into the rest of their lives. We are a world of people dying to be known, yet terrified to be seen. We think that by withholding our feelings, we are protecting ourselves. In reality, we are just building a prison and calling it safety. Then there is the tragedy of postponed joy. I wish that I had let myself be happier. It sounds so simple, yet it's the most complex regret of all. Many people don't realize until the end that happiness is a choice, not a destination. They spend 50 years waiting for the right time to be happy. They wait for the kids to graduate, for the mortgage to be paid, for the retirement. They are so busy preparing for life that they forget to actually live it. I remember Elena. She was 82, suffering with cancer, and she spent her last lucid hour laughing at a memory of her falling into a fountain in 1955. She told me, "You know, I spent my whole life waiting for the storm to pass. I didn't realize I was supposed to be dancing in the rain." We get comfortable in our misery because it feels familiar. We wear our stress like a badge of honor. But at the end, nobody cares how hard you struggled, they only care if you ever learned how to breathe. Elena looked at me with eyes that were already half gone and said, "Tell people they shouldn't just exist. It's an insult to the people who didn't get today." And we cannot forget the trade-off. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Every single male patient I ever had said this. They weren't thinking about the deals they closed or the promotions they earned. They were thinking about the bedtime stories they missed. They were thinking about the smell of their toddler's hair that they never truly noticed because they were checking their emails. They realized that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it bounces back. But family, health, and spirit are glass balls. If you drop those, they shatter. I've seen men try to buy their way out of death with the money they earned by ignoring their lives. It doesn't work. The ferryman doesn't take a bribe. They trade the fleeting beauty of a Tuesday morning for a bigger title, only to find that at the finish line, the title is just ink on paper, and the morning is gone forever. There is also the prison of other people's opinions. I wish I hadn't cared so much about what people thought. We live our lives in a cage built of what we think the neighbors, the boss, or the strangers on the street are saying about us. But here's the secret I learned from the dying: the audience isn't watching you. They're too busy worrying about their own lines. They're too busy adjusting their own masks. I saw a man who spent his life hiding his passion for art because he thought his serious friends would laugh. On his deathbed, he was surrounded by those friends, and do you know what they talked about? Their own failed dreams. Their own mortgages. They didn't give a damn about his reputation. He had denied himself a lifetime of color for the sake of people who weren't even paying attention. He realized he had been performing for an empty theater. Finally, there is the unfinished song. I wish I had told my story. When a person dies, a whole library burns down. We think we're being humble by keeping our mouths shut, but your story is the inheritance your children actually need. They don't need your money, they need your truth. They need to know that you were human, that you were scared, and that you loved them even when you didn't know how to say it. I think of a woman named Martha. She spent her final days trying to write a letter to her estranged daughter. Her hands were shaking, her vision was failing, but she was desperate. She kept saying, "She needs to know why I left. She needs to know it wasn't her fault." Martha died before she could finish the second page. That daughter will spend the rest of her life wondering about a truth that was 5 inches away from being revealed. Martha's silence wasn't strength, it was a tragedy that will ripple through the next generation. I sat with a man named David who had been a soldier. He was tough, grizzled, and silent. For 3 days, he said nothing. On the fourth day, he looked at me and whispered, "I spent my whole life being a rock. But rocks don't feel anything. And now that I'm breaking, I realized I never let anyone see the cracks. I was so busy being strong that I forgot to be human." He died that evening. His family loved him, but they didn't know him. They loved the rock, not the man hidden inside. This is the crushing weight I'm talking about. It's the weight of the almost. I almost called. I almost said I was sorry. I almost told her she was beautiful. Almost is a haunting word when you're out of time. It's the sound of a door closing just as you reach for the handle. I've seen the physical toll of these regrets. Palliative nurses like to say that the body knows when the heart is holding onto something. They call it terminal restlessness. It's a state of agitation where the patient can't settle, can't find peace. Often, it's not the pain of the disease, it's the friction of a secret trying to claw its way out. I've seen people hang on for days, far past what the doctors thought possible, waiting for one person to walk through the door so they can say the one thing they've been holding for 20 years. And when they finally say it, the change is instant. The tension leaves the jaw. The breathing slows. The soul finally exhales. It's the most beautiful and heartbreaking thing I've ever witnessed. I once spent a week with a man who was waiting for his son to fly in from overseas. They hadn't spoken in a decade. Every time the door opened, the man's eyes would fly open, searching. When the son finally arrived, he sat by the bed and wept. He said, "Dad, I've been waiting 10 years for you to tell me you were proud of me." And the father, with his very last breath, whispered, "I've been waiting 10 years for you to ask." 10 years lost to a standoff of pride. 10 years that could have been full of laughter, reduced to 10 seconds of closure. I'm 74 now, and I'm done being a rock. I'm done being a curator of other people's ghosts. I look at my own life, and I see the cracks. I see the times I chose silence over vulnerability. I see the friends I let slip away because I was busy. I see the brother I lost to a piece of dirt. If you are listening to this, you aren't in one of those beds yet. You still have air in your lungs. You still have the terrifying, beautiful opportunity to be vulnerable. You are still in the middle of your story, not the final chapter. Call the friend you haven't spoken to since the argument. It doesn't matter who was right. Tell the person you love that they are the reason you breathe, even if it makes you feel foolish. Quit the job that is turning your days into grey static. Cry when it hurts. Scream when you're happy. Forgive yourself for the mistakes of your 20-year-old self. Because I can tell you from the finish line, the only thing that hurts more than rejection is the crushing, silent weight of "I wish I had said it." The world doesn't need more composed people. It doesn't need more stable professionals. It needs people who are brave enough to be seen. It needs people who are willing to bleed a little so they can feel a lot. Don't leave your words for a hospice worker to hear. Don't leave your secrets for a tape recorder to hold. Say it now. Say it while the sun is still up. Say it while you can still hear the other person breathe. Because the silence of the end is coming for all of us, and believe me, you don't want to meet it with a full heart. You want to meet it empty, having given every word, every kiss, and every "I'm sorry" you ever had. Life is short. Silence is long. Don't wait until the room is quiet to start talking.